Hello, today we're going to be doing a review of the mixture separation lab for Unioto High School chemistry class. This is one of the first labs that you'll do, and it really teaches you about physical properties and how to use those physical properties to separate a mixture. Okay, so we talk about pure substances and mixtures a little bit. Your goal at the end of this lab is to take a mixture of sand, of salt, and of iron filings, okay, 3 grams of it, and to hand us back pure substances of each. So what we do at first is we give you a little sample of the salt, a little sample of the sand, and some iron filings, and we give you a little table on your paper to use so that you can identify the individual properties for each one of them. So the first property I want you to look at is magnetizable. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I've got a magnet. You'll see what the cellophane's on here for in just a second. Okay, but I've got a magnet in here, just a simple magnet, and I'm going to put it in the salt. Put it in the salt, nothing. So it's not magnetizable. I put it in the sand, nothing. I put it in the iron filings, fantastic. It is magnetizable, so it's the only one of the 3, and here's where the cellophane comes into play. If I simply leave it here and pull the magnet out, there goes my iron filings back down. If you ever put the magnet directly into the iron filings, it's very hard to get them off. So this is a good little trick to use if you're ever using a magnet with something small like shavings. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to mark my paper. Magnetizable salt, no. Iron filings, yes. Sand, no. The next thing is, are these 3 soluble in water? So I've got some test tubes here, and I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt in my first test tube. And let's stir it a little bit. And yeah, I can see it dissolving there. Good. And you can see that it's dissolved. So salt is soluble in water. Okay, I've got another clean one. Let's put my sand in here. If I could hit the test tube, that would be good. Okay, so I've got my sand in there. And let's see, will it dissolve? It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. No, so I would say my sand is not soluble. And my last one, iron filings. My iron filings are not soluble. So let me go ahead and check those off. Soluble in water, salt, yes. Iron filings, no. Sand, no. And then the last category is less dense than water. Well, if the substance is less dense than water, then it would float. If it's more dense than water, it will sink on it. So let's look at this. Well, the salt's soluble, so it doesn't really float. The sand is sunk to the bottom, so it's not less dense than water. And the iron filings sunk to the bottom as well, so they are not less dense than water. They all sink. So let's put no for these. So the next step is now, I'm going to take these properties, these physical properties that I've identified, and I'm going to try to come up with a plan on how I can separate this mixture of all 3. So let's think about this. When I look across here, the first thing I see is I look for differences. The magnetizable one, the only thing that's different is the iron is magnetizable. So I got to be able to use that property to my advantage. I got to be able to use that property to help pull it out. So that seems like a pretty easy thing to do. If I put the magnet over, it'd pull it out. Well, that would leave me with sand and salt. The only difference I see on my sheet between sand and salt is that the salt is soluble in water and the sand isn't. So if I sit and I think about, well, if I put the salt and the sand mixture that I have left in water and I add enough water, the salt will dissolve. And the sand should be setting at the bottom. I've had some students recommend that I try to pour off the salt water and leave the sand there, but I think if you did that, some of the sand would carry over with it, and then of course the sand will be wet from the salt water, so some salt will be stuck in it. So I don't think that's the best way to separate it out. But if we go ahead and we pour that through a filter, that solution through a filter, then the sand should get stuck in that filter and the salt water should come on through. And the last step that I'm going to have is I've got salt water. I have to get that down to salt. So if we had a lot of time, we could probably just let the water evaporate off, but given that we want to speed this up for the sake of the lab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it on a Bunsen burner and boil it, evaporate the water, and then I should be left with salt. So that sounds like a pretty logical steps. We're going to go ahead and start that, but one pitfall is whatever you are going to end up with your product on, you need to weigh first. Okay, a lot of my students tend to forget that, and then they've got their product on there and they can't weigh individually, and they can't separate what's the weight of the product versus what the weight of the container is. So make sure you weigh those containers first. Since I'm going to start with the iron filings, I believe, I'm going to catch them on wax paper. So I'm going to go ahead and weigh this wax paper real quick, and it is 0.4 grams. I'm going to write that down right here. And now I'm going to do just what I said. I'm going to take my magnet, and I'm going to roll this magnet right over my mixture. Okay, I'm going to try to be as thorough as I can. Get all those magnets, or all those iron filings. Boy, that did a pretty good job. I can't see any more in there. So now I should have my iron filings on there, and I'm going to use our trick. I'm going to take it right over here. I'm going to put it on the wax paper. And I may do this one more time while I'm at it, just to make sure I got all of them. Okay, here we go. Now the mixture's not going to be perfect, so you may end up with a little more weight or a little less weight. As long as it equals close to the 3 grams, you should be in pretty good shape. So my iron filings with the wax paper now weighs 1.3 grams. So if I take 1.3 and I subtract the 0.4, my iron filings end up being 0.9 grams. Good. So I've got my iron separated out. I feel pretty good about that. I'm left with my sand and my salt solution. So the next step I'm going to do is I have to dissolve the salt. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in a little beaker. There we go. And I'm going to add enough distilled water to dissolve my salt. Now I don't need to add a ton, because the more I add, the more I'm going to have to boil off later. So I just want to get enough so I can get this salt to dissolve pretty good. Let's get this going. I'm going to spin it a little bit. I'm going to wash this glass a little bit to make sure I get it all in there. Good. Okay. That's pretty good. While I let that salt dissolve, I'm going to go ahead and set up my filter. Now the way you use a filter is, we've got a funnel here, and these are nice little stands made just for this. What I want to do is I want to quarter fold this filter paper. So I'm going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to fold it one more time in quarter. Good. Here's the trick. When you fold it that way, make sure you count over. There should be 4 pieces of paper here now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure you count over 3. 1, 2, 3. And you open it up with 1 piece on one side, 3 on the others. You can then put it into your funnel. If you don't do this, I have people that don't. They count over 2 and they stick it in there. Look what happens. Okay, your solution rolls right around the side and down the funnel without ever being filtered. So again, make sure you count over 1, 2, 3, 1 on the other side, and then it cannot possibly get around it. Another little trick is, if you water your filter a little bit, it will stick in here better, okay? That way it just makes it easier to put your stuff in, nice, and keep it from falling out. So now after I'm done with that, I have to think a little bit ahead. So my collection is going to be in my cup here. Okay, this is heat resistant. Make sure, we're going to boil it in this, so make sure it's we're using something that's heat resistant. I'm going to put it on here and I'm going to weigh it. So that is 70.2. So I'm going to write that down here, 70.2. And now I'm going to put it down here to catch, hopefully, my salt water. So now that this is dissolved well, I'm going to pour this through. Now you can't pour it slow or all the sand's going to get stuck in the bottom. So once you do it, you got to go pretty quick. So here we go. I'm going to stir it, try to get it pulled up, and too quick. Okay. Now probably the easiest way to get the remaining portion is to do a little rinse. Stir again. And I may do one more time just to try to get as much of this sand as possible. Okay, here we go. Good. Good. So it's coming through. This should be my salt water collecting here. I'm hoping that my filter is stopping my sand, and this will take probably 4 or 5 minutes to process through. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. I'll come back once all of the salt water has been collected and the sand should be stuck in the filter. Alright, we're back. And my filter has now done its job, and all of the salt water has come through and is now collected in my evaporation dish here. And my filter looks to have the sand in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull out my filter paper. Okay, and I'm going to spread it out so that it can dry. So I'm going to go ahead and spread it out right here. I'm being very careful not to drop any of my sand. And there you can see all the sand it collected. So that's a nice sample. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for that water to dry off. It dries relatively quick, but it'll probably be tomorrow. I'm going to let that water dry out. And then I'm going to weigh that paper with the sand on it. And I'm going to subtract out the initial weight of the filter paper. And then I'll have what my the mass of my sand remaining is. So that looks pretty good sample though. I'm excited about it. Now, the last step is I've got my salt water. And I can't end with salt water. I have to end with salt. So, to accomplish that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step right this way. Come with me. And I'm going to use a Bunsen burner to boil the water and evaporate off and end with salt, hopefully. So, the first step when I use a Bunsen burner, of course, I'm going to put on my safety glasses. Because here we model safe behaviors. So, lighting a Bunsen burner. People are getting pretty good at it, but we're going to use the striker, and I'm going to make sure the gas is turned off, righty-tighty or clockwise, and I'm going to make sure this is screwed all the way down. Okay, and these gas valves are made so that when they're turned all the way here, all the way the other side, they're off. They're only on when they're turned straight down the gas line. So this is turned straight down the gas line. I'm going to come back and I'm going to open up the valve. This is the valve that regulates the amount of gas flow to the Bunsen burner. So I'm going to open that up and I'm going to strike. So I get a big yellow flame. Now, we got to turn that down to this flame is about 6 inches high. And once we get there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start opening this valve to let oxygen in. When this valve lets oxygen in, you'll see it gets blue. It's a lot less sooty. And I'm going to keep opening it until I see a second cone. And there I've got a nice cone in there that's about 2 inches high. I'm going to go ahead and place that directly under here. Now anytime I heat, I use one of these ceramic plates when I heat under glass. So I'm going to use one of these ceramic plates and I'm going to go ahead and put my evaporation dish on it. You want to make sure it's a low boil, okay? If it gets too high, you're actually going to have the salt pop and you're going to lose a lot of the material that you're trying to collect. So if it gets a little warm, I can turn the gas flow down, or sometimes it's easier just to pull the Bunsen out a little bit, let it cool some, and put it back in there. Now for the sake of time, because this will evaporate out and I'll be left with a nice sample, I'm going to go ahead and show you what we should end with. This is one that one of my students did earlier, but if you can see the evaporation dish, you can see the nice salt residue there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to the scale. Remember, I weighed the evaporation disk previously, and let me grab the scale and go over here. So I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to go ahead and weigh this, and I'm going to take that result and subtract it from the initial weight of the dish. And there I should have my amount of salt. Again, hopefully we're close to 1 gram, 1 gram, 1 gram, but it doesn't matter if it's not perfect. We just want to see that you're doing the right procedures, the right steps, and we hope you enjoyed this mixture separation lab. Thank you.